Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Our guest today is Sam Fisher, an adult third culture kid who grew up in Indonesia as a missionary kid to an American dad and local Indonesian mom. Returning to the U.S. for college, Sam is now a bookseller and dad of 4 in his 40s, living near Boston, Massachusetts. Sam's family spent some periods of his childhood in the U.S., but he primarily lived with them in Indonesia in a small, tight-knit community until he went to boarding school in Malaysia for middle and high school. Though this meant that he only saw his parents twice a year during long vacations, his school community and faith provided him with an extended family. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part 1 of Sam's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
Hello, Sam Fisher. It is so wonderful to have you on our podcast. Thank you for making the time to tell us your stories today.
So glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So everybody, Sam is a very special person to me, and we've seen each other off and on, but we go way back. And I was saying, Sam is my first friend from outside the United States.
Yeah, we met back in 1994, like 30 years ago. I had been living in Indonesia, and my parents had moved to Fresno, and at church I met Tracy.
That's very cool.
You had a red shirt on.
Yes, so I thought I would wear a red shirt for this interview. It's not the same red shirt,
great.
but it's another red shirt.
Well, this is our second interview. You are our second guest where we are focusing on TCKs, so third culture kids that have spent a significant amount of time living abroad and, away from their passport country or their parents' passport country. And so it's going to be great to hear your stories. So as we get started, the first thing we would like to hear is just a little bit about your backstory. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your life now.
Sure. I'm 46. I have 4 kids. They're from ages 12 and a half up to age 20. My wife is a United Methodist pastor. We've been living in the Boston area, just north of Boston, for about 22 years. We have 2 cats. I work at an internet marketing company. It does Christian books. And then as a hobby, I play in the praise team at church where my wife preaches. And I teach confirmation class to the middle schoolers.
Bless your heart, working with those middle schoolers.
That's right. So we can help them just learn to articulate their faith. So that's where I live today. My parents live in Fresno, but my dad was raised in the Bay Area, and my mom's Indonesian. So in addition to being a third culture kid, I'm also a biracial family. So lots of different things going on there.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your family and where you grew up.
Sure. My sister was 5 years older than me. She was born in Indonesia right after they got married. Then they moved up to Oregon, where they had me. My dad was in Bible college at the time, getting ready to become a missionary. And then before I turned 2, they flew back to Indonesia and started work there. So I grew up in Indonesia. The way my parents' organization worked is typically you'd go for 4 years, you'd come back for 1, then you go back for 4, come back for 1, that kind of thing. So they went when I was just before I turned 2, and they extended, and they went for 6 years. They came back for 2. So for 3rd and 4th grade, we were in the Chicago area. My dad was doing grad work. My mom was in college. So we had 2 years there. And then we went back to Indonesia. So 5th, 6th grade Indonesia. When I got to 7th grade at age 12, I went to boarding school in Malaysia, which is a country right next door. And then in 8th grade, they came back for a furlough. It was in Oregon, where one of the biggest home churches that sent us out was. And so we spent a year there, and then they went back. So I finished 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade.
And it's interesting, you wrote in your notes that your mom, tell us about her generation of being a Christian.
Right. So Indonesia was colonized by the Portuguese, and then the Dutch came through and colonized it after the Portuguese. And her particular province was evangelized by the priests who came with the Portuguese. So they've been Christians in her family for about 7 generations. So my dad joined the Peace Corps, and after he finished, he moved to Jakarta, met my mom, who was a Christian, and she shared her faith with him. So it's kind of a neat thing. Oftentimes people are like, oh, clearly the evangelism went this direction, but it actually was the other way.
So your mom helped your dad find a deeper faith while he was in Indonesia.
Exactly. And I didn't really think about it until I was going over the notes for this interview, because Indonesia is such a diverse country. It's 18,000 islands, 6,000 are inhabited. There's so many different people groups and languages and tribes, I guess you could say. So even for my mom to be in Indonesia on the island of Java, it's a different province than where she grew up. And so it was, there's a level of it being a cross-cultural experience for her too, which I just had never really thought of. As a kid, you're doing kid things and you're not thinking, oh, what are my parents going through? But it's tricky to be in a place where you didn't grow up. And that was my mom too.
So now we'll get into some stories about your time living abroad and how it went. So tell us a story about growing up abroad as a TCK.
One of the things that's amazing about Indonesia is there's just so much going on. It's a tropical country. It's number 4 for population. You have China, India, US, and then Indonesia. And most people don't think about it as being that populous, but it's pretty large. And because of that, they're also the largest Muslim country. Like you think of the Gulf countries as being large Muslim countries, but the flavor of Islam in Indonesia is a little bit different. So there's that. It was really beautiful. I had, like some of my earliest memories are over there because I was so young. One of the first houses we lived in, we have a photo of me and my sister in the backyard with a water pump, like pumping water. I don't think the house needed that water from the pump, but there's a picture of me in diapers out back pumping water.
There was a water pump.
Yeah. But the main house I remember growing up, it was in a smaller village up in the mountains, and we didn't even have hot water in the house. There was indoor plumbing, but it was only cold water, and you couldn't drink it, so you'd have to boil it. Our neighbors had chickens. They cooked, I think, over open fire, kind of. Some people had like propane that you would get in like compressed tanks, and so that's what we had for cooking was the propane. And it was a cobblestone street, and the Bible college where my parents worked was like walking distance, so we didn't have a car, so we just walked to church, walked to the school where they were teaching. And part of the job as being teachers was to have like home groups. So they had like the second year boys men's group. So they would meet like weekly at our house. And so it's kind of neat to be like, oh, around these other Indonesian Christians as seminarians or Bible college kids type of thing. And I went to Indonesian preschool, but then I went to an international school about a half hour away, and we carpooled with some Norwegian Lutheran missionaries, some Dutch missionaries, and it was a small school, K through 7, and about 24 to 30 kids total.
Oh, wow. In the whole school?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a small family-like atmosphere. I hope it was a tight-knit, positive community. I mean, it sounds like it could be.
It was, and they would pair up, so like your teacher would teach 2 grades at the same time.
Right.
It's kind of like some homeschool groups do that, where they group together. But we had, my mom had a relative from her province who lived around the corner from us. So my sister and I could go over on Sunday afternoon. There was 1 hour of English television. It was Little House on the Prairie. So we could go watch Little House on the Prairie on Sunday afternoons. And then in the evenings, there was a half hour of English programming. But it's government TV, and it's a Muslim country, so they would have to have the call to prayer. and they would interrupt television and have the Arabic guy singing and pastoral scenes of Indonesian countryside with ducks walking along, the rice paddies,
Interesting.
palm trees and stuff. And then the show would come back on and you would never get to see what had been happening in that like 3 minutes. There was no commercials, but there was the call to prayer and it always interrupted the show.
Hey, so what languages did you grow up speaking?
So we spoke English at the house and Indonesian at the preschool. And the island of Java has its own dialect called Javanese. So I didn't know that some of the words that I thought were Indonesian words were actually Javanese words. Because as a kid, you just don't differentiate. Like I said the word for big, maybe I was in high school at the time, and the Indonesian corrected me. They said, no, don't you mean this word big? And I was like, oh, right. Because to me, they're synonyms. I didn't realize that one was Javanese and the other one was Indonesian.
All right. Well, Sam, tell us about something that was hard growing up as a TCK.
The hardest thing was transitions. So when I was a second grader, I was fluent in Indonesian, probably Javanese. But we went home to my passport country, to Illinois, which we had never lived in. We did get to see my grandparents. But for 2 years, I didn't hear any Indonesian, really. Like my parents would speak it occasionally if we were in public to like talk about those people, right?
Right. Yes.
Like
the secret code language.
The secret language. Right. Yeah. We didn't really use it much. And there wasn't Indonesian church that we went to in Chicago. So then when I came back after third and fourth grade, it had kind of erased from my brain.
Oh, no.
So the transition was hard because you leave like a family-sized school where you know everybody and you have to be the new kid at the new school in Chicago. And I think in that 2-year period, I went to 3 schools.
Oh, boy.
I made friends easily because like I'm a friendly kid and Chicago's pretty diverse in population, you know. But the transition coming back was hard because it was coming back to somewhere that I knew but had changed and I had changed and I had forgotten stuff. That was really foundational.
That's hard. Even if you are a friendly kid, that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. And another difficult transition was the going to boarding school. Like as a 12-year-old, I was excited about it because my sister was already there. She was a senior when I was going to be a 7th grader. So we got to overlap at school there. And we went from a school of 24 kids, that was K through 7, and this school was 1st through 12th, and it was 200 kids. So there's a lot more kids from all over Southeast Asia and other parts beyond. And that was a great experience, but as a new kid to a boarding school, you're still a little worried about how it's going to be. But as a teenager, it was awesome to not be around my parents. So I get to live with my friends and only see them on summer vacation or Christmas vacation.
Okay.
Yeah, so how many times a year did you see your parents after you went off to boarding school? What did that work out to?
It was twice a year. So Christmas was a 5-week break, and then summer was 9 weeks. And then if they had like ministry opportunities in the area, sometimes they would stop by. But they didn't really come that often. So there's things like in high school, I played soccer and I played volleyball and I ran track and basketball. I think my dad saw me play basketball one time and my mom saw me run track one time.
Mm-hmm. Was that hard for you? Do you remember at that point being sad about that? Or was it just the way it was and so you didn't care?
It was just the way it was, but now I feel like we're super involved with our kids' activities like that. And so my son does marching band, and so I'll show up and I'll push percussion out onto the field before he performs. And then I'll video it with my old school video camera, and then I'll put it on YouTube, and then I'll send the link to the grandparents so that they can see the stuff. And like my father-in-law lives with us, and so he shows up at the shows too. So like, my grandparents never saw any of that part of my life, and I didn't really remember meeting them until I was a 3rd grader. So it's just a different kind of center of gravity for the family because there's it's like a family business, and you just can't ever leave it behind.
Yeah.
So are you saying that your parents had that kind of family business as far as being missionaries and they couldn't leave that behind?
I think so, yeah. Like the way they decided things was based on where God was calling them, and it wasn't based on the kids' activities, you know. It was like this is the important thing. But as a kid, you're like, oh, it's just what my parents do.
Well, and I think too that it made a difference that you were at a school where all of the kids were living away from their families or their parents at least. And so it wasn't like you were the only kid at the school whose parents weren't there. Everybody was in that same situation. And so now you're comparing your kid's experience with what your experience was like. And I would think that you would experience a little bit of grief in hindsight over, I didn't get to have this with my parents, and my parents didn't get to have this with me. That, you know, there's a little bit of maybe sadness there. And also it sweetens the appreciation of, you know, the things that you get to do with your kids now. Would you say that that's accurate?
No, that's a good insight. There is a bittersweetness to it where I had some really great experiences with my friends, but then there's the longing of where were my parents. And third culture kids deal with it differently. So it's a strange kind of space to be in. And then how well are you able to connect with people if you don't have a good foundation of where you're connected and grounded? But what was great, like you pointed out, was everyone at the school. I mean, there's some business kids who were day students, but the majority of the kids came from the same kind of setup, and so we all have the same. We all have the same preface to our story. Like you can Mad Libs the different countries and stuff like that, but it's basically the same thing.
Well, Sam, tell us about something that you loved.
So I really loved the friendships that I made with the friends at school. I'm going to see some of them this summer in July in Colorado for a reunion. So there's still those connections. And like when we get together, it's like really close cousins is kind of how I would describe it. They have a kind of affinity for each other that is different than other friends. Like it's a deeper kind of friendship. Yeah, it's like Hogwarts, but without the magic. So you're there with your friends for 24 hours a day, and you get into all sorts of kind of trouble or whatever, and you have practice. It was gorgeous. It was Penang, Malaysia. It was on the beach. So outside our cafeteria and where chapel was, there's a little seawall, and you could hop over the wall and just be right there on the ocean. There was lots of runoff, so it was never clear kind of tropical water, but it was really gorgeous. And like the trees have a certain kind of smell to them, and they're like, there's a rubber tree there that had all these tendrils. And once school got out, you'd have practice, then you'd have dinner. We had a big bell system, so there's always a bell, and then you have study hall. Then after study hall, you go play basketball till the lights go out on the court, and it's like 9 o'clock in the middle of the week, and you go in and then hang out with your buddies and just rinse and repeat. It's fantastic. And then we got to go on like fun trips for choir and for soccer. So we went to Kuala Lumpur for a soccer thing and for a choir thing. We went to Singapore for a band exchange and choir exchange too. Previous years they'd gone to Bangkok. And then like for our senior trip, like I don't know, Tracy, Melissa, if you guys had like senior skip day.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we had, it was called Senior Sneak, and we take a week off, and we went to Thailand.
A week?
Oh my gosh.
So
To another country.
But let's talk about distances. So how far away is Thailand from Penang?
it was probably a half hour, 45-minute flight. We went to Phuket. Yeah. So it was just kind of a different, like exotic kind of location, really cool places, and then great friends that you make along the way. And like some of the teachers that I had really had an impact on me, and like the dorm parents and the staff. So there was like the dorm parents from when I was in 7th grade. They ended up being our class sponsors when we were juniors and seniors, and some really good connections there.
Yeah, those people would be really important.
Yeah, acting as aunties and uncles for you, like an extended family.
Right, exactly.
To manage all of those cousins.
So, Sam, tell us a story about going back to visit your passport country.
So in third and fourth grade, we went back to California first to see my grandparents, and then we went to the Chicago area. And one of the funny things that happened is eventually when I think we were on married student housing on campus in the dorms. So my sister and I were hanging out in the library. I guess we were waiting for my dad to finish up something or whatever. And I was goofing off. And like I mentioned before, we would use Indonesian as like our private language or whatever. So I'm being a silly. And so in Indonesian, she calls me stupid, which is fine, because I was being a goofball. But around the corner, some other seminarian who spoke Indonesian came around the corner and in Indonesian asks, "Who's the stupid one?" And my sister is mortified.
That's so funny.
Somebody understands.
Right. I don't even remember where they were from, if they were Indonesian or if they were like a Korean missionary to Indonesia or what.
That's hilarious.
But that was the funny story was like her trying to get away with being secretive and being found out.
There are eyes everywhere.
Yes, that's funny. And I think you were also going to share something about when you went back to Beaverton, Oregon.
Yes. So in Beaverton, where I was born, there was one of the larger churches that had supported my parents. And so we lived there when I was in 8th grade. And that youth group was fantastic. It was pretty vibrant. They had some great youth pastors there. I think the youth pastor when I was there is still there on staff. And they had Sunday night services, and they had the Tuesday night youth groups, and they had like the retreat to the coast in the springtime, and then going sledding on Mount Hood. And everybody in 8th grade got a Bible, like a NIV student study Bible, which I still have from that youth group. And I think they did, there was like when you moved up from the middle school youth group to the high school youth group, there was like a special breakfast and you got woken up and had to go. So it was a really great kind of positive experience there.
I love that you got to have some of those experiences in a place where you felt more connected than maybe some of the other places that you were just passing through because of the connection your parents had there. And, it was the place you were born. And it's neat to have some of those milestones in a place that was meaningful.
Yeah. And it makes me think about how you're remembering this 1 year of youth group and how important that was to you. And now as youth groups here in, wherever we are, when there are new kids who come, how important it is to bring them in and how important it is to make them feel cared for. Because we never know where kids are coming from. They could be coming from Indonesia. They could be coming from around the corner. We don't know. But we're all part of God's body and bringing up the kids in God's body of Christ.
This is our last question for part 1 of your round trip stories. So tell us, Sam, what do you value most about your growing up story at this point in your life?
Yeah. What I value most about my growing up story is how it expanded my view of the world, of God's work in the world. We had some really good teachers and staff people, like I mentioned. And so one of them, I remember in chapel, he got up and he shared this verse from Matthew 19. It's one of the places where Jesus talks to people about if they give up their mother and father and their brothers and sisters and service for him, that God promises them back 100 times more to be received back from that investment, I guess. And so he talked about that, and he said, you guys are the 100 times more that have blessed us. And so it was really kind of a sweet kind of connection. Be like, right, he's a great dorm parent, great basketball coach, a really neat kind of guy. And just to think that we were part of blessing him, even though he had given up lots of stuff. And that's the thing is, you make these sacrifices, and sometimes you think about it or you don't think about it, but God does value what you've offered up to God, and God sees that and does reward that.
Yeah.
The other verse that really helped me And I use this in like my valedictorian speech. It was from my physics teacher. He talked about the foundation that you build on, and there's the foundation of straw that will burn and won't last in 1 Corinthians 3. But the foundation of Jesus is the one that really matters for your life. And so wherever you do live, grow up, or transition to, that core principle of being grounded in your faith, like for me as a Christian, it really, really helped. Even though the transitions were tricky, I would find my space at the church youth group,
Yeah.
So to be investing in that kind of foundation.
Right. Yeah, because you carry that with you and can connect to other members of the church family and find other communities of family. And you get to connect in a way that can be really grounding and help you not feel so adrift or so lost in those transitions. I remember when I was in college and I went to spend a summer studying in Mexico. And I remember sitting in a church, and I knew some Spanish by then, but it was, my Spanish wasn't strong, but I remember just feeling so connected to that church, and it being just such an incredible thing to feel like, wow, it's home, even though I'm so far away from home. And yeah, I love that about the church around the world.
Definitely.
Right. It's like, if you think about it, at my church, we have a World Communion Sunday. And I think lots of churches kind of observe that. And one of the neat things is to think, right now around the world, maybe a couple hours before us, a couple hours after us, people are still doing the same kind of thing, remembering Jesus and his body and blood, and going through that. And you're like, this is a really neat thing. We're part of something bigger than ourselves.
Thank you, Sam, for sharing your round-trip stories from growing up in Indonesia and Malaysia. Your childhood as a missionary third culture kid allowed you to grow up around a global community, and the roots you made in your faith stabilized you through rocky transitions of moving to boarding school and spending stints back in the U.S. Wherever you were in the world, the body of Christ was there to provide you with the extended family you needed, especially all those close cousins from boarding school. So what happened when Sam returned to the U.S. for college? You'll have to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of Sam's round trip story.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first class seating? Be sure to subscribe to the Round Trip Stories podcast in your favorite podcast app and sign up for our email list at roundtripstories.com so you'll never miss an episode. We believe that sharing stories helps our understanding of the world grow larger while the distance between us grows smaller.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.